Let's agree to disagree. And what I mean by that for today's episode is let's agree that it is okay for us to disagree. In today's episode of Christianity Without Compromise, we are going to talk about empathy, disagreeing, curiosity, and a better way to listen and relate to these wonderful, interesting human beings in the world. This is a really fascinating episode. We're joined today by Liz Charlotte Grant, an award-winning journalist and essayist whose work has appeared in The Christian Century, Christianity Today, Sojourners, and Religion News Service, and more. She's also the writer behind the Webby-nominated newsletter, The Empathy List, and her first book was Knock at the Sky, Seeking God in Genesis After Losing Faith in the Bible. But today, we're going to talk a lot about disagreement, so prepare yourselves. I'm Jake Doberenz, and this is Christianity Without Compromise, a podcast for Christians who love Jesus but are tired of culture war faith. Now, let's get to rebuilding a faith that actually looks like Jesus. Well, Liz, it is really great to have you on Christianity Without Compromise today. Always exciting to talk with interesting people.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what we like to do here. Talk to interesting people, and then you fit the bill. And I don't think we're going to be disagreeing a lot today, but that is kind of part of our topic today is disagreeing. So I hope you'll have empathy towards me, and I'll have empathy towards you, and the listener can have empathy towards us, and it's sure to be a great conversation.
I always love hearing from people who disagree with me, so that'd be great.
Exactly.
Reach out, guys.
Exactly. For sure. I hear some different things from the podcast. I did have one person tell me, yeah, there was one episode where I just turned it off in the middle. I didn't like any of it. So, well, that's okay. That's on you, that's fine. But hey, we're just here to have some conversations. I do hope everybody stays to the end because there's always some good stuff, and we can wrestle with all these topics and email our comments or YouTube the comments or whatever needs to be said. We can have those conversations other places too. So great intro. But Liz, I actually want you to take us back in time a little bit to this moment when you got to speak with this theological giant, Wayne Grudem. He, for better or for worse, the guy's written some influential things. He's done some influential things in the world of theology. And especially known for kind of his advocacy of complementarianism and biblical inerrancy, like some, pretty hard stances on those sort of things. So tell us about talking with this guy who, spoiler alert, you had some disagreements with.
Yeah, just
tell
a
us
little.
about talking with him, interacting with him, and what that was like to talk with somebody that you did have, disagreements with.
Yeah. I think I told you this story earlier, but I'm a Christian Century columnist. So I write for this kind of historic magazine, and it is historically very progressive. All of the big evangelical theologians are not fans of this magazine. And I was writing an essay about sort of the summit, the Chicago summit, where the Chicago Statement on Biblical Inerrancy was written. So I was looking into the history of this and the people involved, and lo and behold, Wayne Grudem was there with his wife. He was sort of a young buck theologian at the time. I think he was like a junior associate professor somewhere. And he tapped a professor and asked them to get him an invite to this. And he and his wife, Margaret, drive up to Chicago and, in their van. And I was like, I have got to talk to him about this. I've got to talk to him. So I was like, he's not going to like the angle I take. I just know, because I'm going to just tell your listeners now, I'm not a biblical inerrantist. And in fact, I think the Bible's a lot more interesting than that. But that is not what a lot of these evangelical, original Theo bros think, right? so there was like whole discussions about this in the 80s, 70s, late 70s, 80s, and then they have this big summit. But I'm like, Wayne was there. I have to talk to him and figure out what was happening here. So I'm emailing him. I'm emailing his TA. I'm like emailing over and over. And finally, I get through to him, and we have this long phone conversation. And it was this fascinating conversation. I just said, Wayne, I am probably coming from a very different theological place than you are. But I'm really looking to tell this story accurately. And I want to be able to hear and kind of share what was happening in your minds and portray you accurately. So like, I'm not looking to do a gotcha. I'm going to be direct. But I would love to just learn what this experience was like for you. We had this really interesting conversation where he told me some of the details of being at this event, but then we got into kind of some deeper things where I was asking him, hey, because by the way, friends, I don't know if you know this, but the Chicago Statement on Biblical Inerrancy, which is the statement that still defines how most evangelicals read the Bible, okay? This statement was written by 250 white men. They had 13 women in the room. Not all of them signed this document because they were not like voting members on writing this document. And in addition, there were only 8 people of color involved. And I asked Wayne, is that true? That's what the document says. I had chased down these signatories on the document to sort of figure out who are these people. I said, is that true? He said, yeah, I don't remember one non-white person in the room. And I was like, okay. Well, I asked him, what difference does it make? Do you think it would have made a difference to have other folks in the room? And he said, no, I absolutely do not.
Sure. Yeah.
And we went on from there. But I think one of the things that I was most proud of from this interview was walking away and feeling like he and I had a real and genuine connection despite our disagreements. And after I wrote this piece, I sent it to him and said, hey, if you want to write something in response, I'm sure my editors would publish it. And he wrote me back and he said, no, I think that's fair. I think that's pretty accurate for what we think. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take it.
For sure. You should. Yeah.
Wayne approved.
There we go. That should be in your Threads bio or whatever. So yeah, no, thank you for sharing that story. I think that sets up our conversation today. It also shows the kind of person that you are. I mean, with the journalist angle, obviously you have these kind of ethics of journalism, right? Of you want to tell the story, how it happened, kind of things. But that's so much more than just something responsible journalism here. It's responsible humanity. I remember once I heard a talk with a professor and a writer, Dr. Alan Noble, who will be on the show next month. And he said, he talked about how loving your enemies means accurately representing their views and their stories and things. That always stuck with me because that's so true. Like, if you're truly going to love somebody who you profoundly disagree with, you got to be accurate. You got to get their opinions. You got to get that right.
Well, you have to understand it, right? Like, you have to have a curiosity to understand even what they think and believe. It's not even just about kind of an intellectual knowledge or, it's actually making space to try to understand it and understand where they're coming from. One of the things that I walked away with from that interview with Wayne Grudem was that biblical inerrancy was about certainty. It was about certainty. It was about control. It was about fear. It was all sorts of things. And I felt like I got such a better picture of what the men who wrote this statement were actually like.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. So, I mean, you've already said it, like, you're this person that you like to talk with people you disagree with. You like to engage in those kind of conversations and sort of who you are. What draws you to that? Why do you want to talk to people that say and believe things that are so different than the things that you hold? what draws you to that? How has that become a defining part of your work?
Yeah. So I started in evangelicalism, and I'm somewhere in that space now. I'm, a little more progressive than I was. Okay, a lot more progressive than I was. But I was, I studied at Wheaton College. I have kind of the evangelical credentials. And so I very much understand that mindset, and I really never fit in that mindset. And one of the biggest ways is that I was always very curious to kind of go outside of my experience. And I found that often there was a resistance to that in certain more conservative evangelical spaces. There was a sense of maybe fear, maybe a sense of it just seemed like fear to me. I don't know. I sometimes am still really baffled by this, because I think curiosity has always been a really central tenet of how I move through the world. I've always been someone who's very curious. I want to read about and learn about people who are different from me. Part of this is I grew up and lived in many different places. My dad changed jobs fairly frequently, and we were kind of transferred overseas some. We lived in the States, different states. So we were not in one place when I was growing up, and I got to see and experience a lot of different things that kids don't necessarily experience otherwise. And I think that taught me that there's such a variety of people and experiences in the world, and yet there's this core that ties us to each other, this core identity about being human, not even just being Christian, right? But being human.
Yeah.
That ties us all together. And I think that's always been a real driving force for me to try to understand, what does this other human think? Because I have a hunch that, when you get down to it, it's some of the same desires and drives that I have, right? And really seeking to understand it in a way that I'm kind of relating it to my own experience gives me a real sense of what it means, and helps me sort of plumb the depths of that person and that experience. But yeah, I think I've always felt a real hunger to know and understand more. And some people call that empathy.
Some people do call that. And let's talk about that buzzword that you just used, because I guess that is a buzzword these days, right?
I know.
Empathy. There's opinions about it from various people. And some people are saying empathy, bad thing, don't like it, not good. Or at least they're saying we can use it in a way of which is supporting kind of these toxic things or something of that nature. So can you talk about why you like empathy? Why you think it's a cool Christian thing? Like, can you defend empathy for us, I suppose?
I mean, I love this question in so many ways, because it feels really absurd to me too.
I'm glad you picked that up when I was saying it. Like, it's an absurd thing, but can you still help us out here?
It's very strange. I almost don't know where to begin. If someone's listening and they think empathy is toxic, I'd actually really love to talk to you. So would you please DM me on Instagram? But anyway, I think one of the things that just has felt always so intuitive to me is this sense that I'm not the center of the world, right? Like, I am not the centerpiece of the universe. And that means that there are other people with other concerns and other priorities and other experiences. And I think that's really central to Christian teaching, right? Like, I individually am not the center of the universe. So that's the first thing I would say, is like, empathy is an acknowledgement, a humble acknowledgement of me not being at the center. Okay, so that's the first thing. And then I would say, in addition, empathy is about storytelling. It's about understanding. It's about curiosity. Those are deeply human traits, right? Trying to understand, if for no other reason than, we're trying to survive, let's say. If we're trying to survive, we have to be able to understand threats, if nothing else, right? So we have to be able to understand what's happening around us to be able to stay safe in, say, a tribal culture, right? And that requires a sense of kind of curiosity about what makes other people tick, kind of how they think, what they're going to do, right? So it requires some kind of curiosity about other people. I think all of those things are related to empathy. These are all like empathic skills, right?
Yeah.
And then I think the last thing, just really theologically, and those are just sort of common sense things, by the way. Those are not necessarily theological things, but they have theological roots, I believe. I think the most important theological reason that I see empathy as really the centerpiece of the gospel, frankly, is that we have this example of Christ in the incarnation coming in our own form, like one of us, to be and live with us, to understand and reach us. If that is not empathy, I don't know what empathy is.
Yeah.
So to me, kind of God putting on flesh in order to come reach people who would otherwise never reach out, right? Or never be able to bridge the gap between us and God. The fact that God does that first, that is a way of God empathizing with us and coming toward us, right? And I just see empathy as that kind of act. It's like, how do we minister to other people? Well, we kind of have to understand them. We have to listen. We have to try to put ourselves in their position and understand what that means, right? How would we feel? Loving my neighbor as myself is a way of doing this, right? It is, I'm going to love my neighbor as myself. Well, I have to understand my neighbor. I have to put myself in their position, and then I have to spend myself to love them. So anyway, I mean, would I love to talk to Allie Beth Stuckey about this? Obviously, yes.
Sure.
Would she hate me? Yes.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't expect her to have empathy for you, I suppose. So, yeah, I probably would go that direction. I love everything you're saying. Like you're bringing up the concepts of curiosity, of empathy, of listening. I mean, these are all things that are near and dear to me because I did grow up certain about everything. I had the entire Bible figured out before I went to college. It was so great. Like I had everything figured out.
I bet that felt so safe, Jake.
Yeah.
That felt so safe. Yeah.
And I went to a conservative, you would call it, I guess, evangelical college and stuff, but still was shown diversity of views. There are really smart people that didn't think Genesis 1 was like the snapshot of reality.
Right.
In one of our classes, we were a New Testament class. We were assigned a Jewish feminist scholar, Dr. Amy Jill Levine, and we're gonna look at these other perspectives here, and we're gonna learn from that. And truth is found in engagement with all these things. So this has been my journey. This is something I'm super passionate about. And the world is so beautiful if we just listen and open our eyes and talk to some other people and things of that nature.
Yeah, it's so connected to wonder, isn't it? And a sense of kind of gratitude for what God has given us. I mean, this is a beautiful world, and there are beautiful people in this world. Do you know what I mean? And their experiences are different. And so being able to encounter them is a way of encountering the Imago Dei, right? Like we encounter these aspects of God out in the world, in bodies, in people. That is just beautiful, but it requires attention. It requires the skill of listening and receiving and gratitude to be able to even, to be able to notice it, right? To have it do anything to us at all. But if we let it, it can form us and make us more like God.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, let's talk more about our church spaces, our religious spaces when we gather. Sadly, churches aren't necessarily known as kind of poster children for like healthy disagreement or even just accepting of a variety of ideas. Too often deviating from the norm is silenced, not welcomed. Either you're physically pushed out, or there's some kind of shunning or whatever. Something happened. Like, there's different ways this could go. So why why are churches these places where it seems like we can't just disagree? And then, like, Liz, what do we do about that? How can we begin to create a better space? If you could just solve all the world's problems today, that would be super nice. Thank you. That would be really great. This
And
episode
someone
gets
who
so many
believes
downloads.
that she has all the answers. So
Yeah,
I can
exactly.
definitely solve this problem for you. I mean, I just think it's so connected to all of the things that, so many of your listeners who have come out of evangelicalism or who have kind of grown up in any sort of church environment. I mean, people are drawn to religion for different reasons, right? Some of us are drawn because we're very curious people. I hope that that's the majority of people, right? I also know that some people are drawn to religion because it is a structure and it creates kind of a structure, gives certainty to us, right? Like, it gives a sense of safety and security. And some people, all of us need safety and security, right? But there is kind of a limit to that church can really provide. And part of that is God is invisible. I mean, I feel like I need to just say that God is not that God doesn't enter human existence, but God doesn't have a human body that I can interact with day to day, right? That is a challenge. When we're going, what do we make of our lives? We don't have somebody we can ask, right? Because God is not human. God is human in Jesus, but God is more than that, right? God is three persons.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so there is an inherent challenge when you say, what is there in the world beyond this world? And we can't catalog it the way that we'd like to, right? And so when you come to church looking for certainty, you're going to do everything you can to build a box, right? But God is not in a box. And so that's just kind of, you just like run into issues as soon as you start that construction project, right? Like, I mean, there's no way to box God. And we try, and I understand why we try. I mean, I think it is actually a reasonable desire. I just think it's wrong. And I think it leads to great harm. Like, it can lead to great harm. So, back to your actual question about disagreement. I mean, I think that's so connected to all these things, right? When we are looking for certainty, it's not okay if somebody questions our conclusions. It's not okay if someone questions the set out static doctrine that we've, nailed down. It's just, we cannot superglue God. I don't know how else to say. I mean, I'm just like reaching for every construction language that I can possibly do. Yeah. But it's just not something that we can give ourselves in religion and in church. And I think when we run into people who have these differing desires, one is for kind of a sense of curiosity and wonder that has brought them there. And so they're going kind of, are there people who are experiencing this too? And they're not actually looking for a box, but they're looking for people who are asking similar questions. And then there are folks who are just looking for the box, right? And those folks are always going to butt heads. Like, that's just always going to be conflict prone, because they're different temperaments, they're different seasons of life. I mean, I think the way that people try to answer those big questions of life, that's just not compatible. So anyway, I think in my own experiences, when I have had that conflict, it's because I've been pushing on some of those things and it makes other people afraid.
Yeah. I mean, again, coming out of my own story, I didn't like the dark edges of reality, the things I couldn't see that was in the shadows, right? I relate to that so much. There is a fear. There's too many what ifs that start, and then slippery slope kind of thinking, what if I question this and then everything, it gets scary for some people, for sure.
I mean, it's scary for I think this is the truth, is it's just scary. And there are folks that have a capacity to manage that better than others. Like there are some folks who are more resilient and can work within that fear. And then there are some folks who refuse to even acknowledge it. And the hope is that people would actually keep growing, right? And would reach a point of comfort with uncertainty. But there is a challenge when those two butt up against each other.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. For sure. And again, I've been there. I'm still working on my level of comfort with uncertainty. In recent years, I have been semi-comforted by kind of learning more church history, where I see, hey, some of these debates have been going on a long time. There are some things there's a thread of continuance for the last 2,000 years, but there's a lot of stuff. It's like, oh, there's a lot of really smart people that come down different sides of this thing. Like that comforts me. That can make some people really uncomfortable, I guess. But for me, it's like, okay, that's good. There's room to wrestle. We've always been wrestling with these ideas. We didn't just figure it out. And so that's something that I've definitely benefited from, engaging in a little bit of history for sure. So, well, so much good stuff today.
We didn't solve the church problem, though, did we?
We didn't solve the church problem. Can you go do that for us real quick? Like, take like 5 minutes, solve the church problem.
I'll be right
back. Yeah, like, what do we do? What do we do about this? Thanks for reminding me.
No, I mean, I think one of the things that's been important to me as I consider interacting with people with whom I disagree, because that's kind of what you're asking, right? It's not really like, how do you solve church conflict? It's like, how do you actually talk to people with whom you disagree?
Yeah.
And I think it's all the same things. It's deciding that you don't have to be right in that moment, and all you need to be is present. You're sitting and listening, and you're taking in and trying to understand. You don't have to convince somebody. You don't have to. I mean, it really starts with your own internal work to say, I don't have to be right now. My in-laws may have a very different political stance than me, and I actually want to understand that. And so instead of yelling at them about how they're wrong, I'm going to sit and listen and ask them questions and, follow the model of Jesus, which was so often question asking, right? Tell me more. I'd like to understand that better. What do you mean by that? How does that make you feel? What are you afraid of? I mean, these are just like very human questions, right? So it's like, how do you kind of talk with someone with whom you disagree? You treat them like a human. You treat them like their opinion matters and you care about them. And then hopefully you actually do care about them.
Yes. Yeah. I want to say too, just in case anybody's confused here, I would think you agree with me that, like, we're not asking to change your mind just because you talk to somebody. Like, you can still hold your opinion and talk to somebody different than you, right? Like, yeah, that's okay. You don't have to change your mind just every time you meet somebody that has a different view than you. And I mean, just the reality is it takes us sometimes a long time to wrestle with these ideas. I don't know about you. I'm a flip-flopper sometimes. Like, I'll have a problem and I'll tackle it for a couple of years and I'll be convinced one way or the other, until I finally reach a point where I say, okay, this is my stance now. This is my position. That's happened with a myriad of theological subjects. And that's just the process. Like, talk to some different people. You don't always have to change your mind. But have that empathy, right? Engage in saying, well, at least I can kind of see where they're coming from. I get that. Sometimes it's really hard because you're like, I would not reach that conclusion, crazy person. But it's always helpful to kind of say, all right, I see how you connected the dots there.
Yeah, I mean, at the root, there's a way that you can kind of connect with them as a person, right? There's always a way. And that ultimately should be our goal. I mean, there's very, very little we can do to change each other's minds. I'm just being totally frank with you about that.
So true.
One of the ways that we do is through storytelling. But honestly, even that is like, it's mystery kind of. It's, amorphous. Like, it's not something to hold on to. We're not beating each other over the head with stories, right? Like, it's very much, here's another experience. encounter it and be formed by it. And that's kind of how we change over time, right? I feel like being able to just be present with someone and have belonging come first, before agreement, before, we're on the same page. I think that's something that's really important in certain settings, and especially a church setting or a family setting, belonging being the key piece for a community to really thrive.
Yeah. Well, good. We solved it. Excellent. Perfect. Easy peasy. Everybody can just implement that. So
You're welcome.
Perfect. I'll get along. We'll all belong. Beautiful. No, not quite. But I feel like I say this in every episode, but like, this is a conversation. We started a conversation. In 30 minutes, we can't solve everything, but you can DM and email and YouTube comment and whatever else you need to do, to continue that conversation with us, or, find a friend and have that conversation with them, talk about these kind of things. So that is a great practice to get into. Liz, I do want you to have a chance, before we get to that last final question that everybody gets, I want you to talk about what you're up to these days, the places you're writing, the projects you're contributing on, all that fun stuff. So take some moments to point us to cool places.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most obvious is my newsletter, my Substack, which is called The Empathy List, of course.
Yeah.
So if you are looking for more of this kind of stuff, I do tend to be unapologetically leftist.
Sure.
So, come over and argue with me if you want. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm on Instagram and Threads at Liz Charlotte Grant, which is just my name. I write a column for the Christian Century where I write about, politics in nuanced ways, hopefully. Yeah, and I'm writing another book. So I already have a book. It's called Knock at the Sky. It's about Genesis. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a nuanced lyrical commentary on the book of Genesis. So lots of things to look into if you want.
Yes, absolutely. We mentioned Genesis earlier too, so that's a good resource to check out as well, and all your other stuff. So appreciate your voice, appreciate you coming on, all of that. But before you go, we do have this one question. Everybody gets on the show where we kind of break everything down. You can give us that last word of what you want to leave people with. So here's the question. I'm going to read it for you. As we close, leave the audience with just one practical action they can do this week to live out their faith fully for Jesus.
I mean, I think read a fiction book. That is one of the best ways to develop empathy, according to the research, is kind of entering somebody else's life through a fictional story of some kind. So I say treat yourself to a book that has been looking interesting, or you've been hearing about, and really immerse yourself, especially with all our political news, which can be very overwhelming. I think it is A-okay to immerse yourself in a good book.
I love it. That's a really good one. I like it. That's an underrated practical action that we can indeed do this week, and that's really good. So everybody go find a good fiction book.
Audiobooks count, by the way. Audiobooks count.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do indeed. So appreciate it. So appreciate it. I end the episodes by always encouraging people to share this episode with somebody. And I mean, it's so perfect today. Share this episode with somebody that you disagree with or want to have a conversation about disagreement with. Sneak it over to the person that maybe doesn't have quite the curiosity. Maybe they're focused a little too much on certainty. Send it their way, start that conversation, have a good time. I think that would be really excellent. Excellent to continue the work that we started here on the show. But Liz Charlotte Grant, thank you so much for being on Christianity Without Compromise. We super duper duper appreciate it today.
Thanks for having me, and happy disagreeing, friends.
Happy disagreeing. Love it. We'll end it right there. This episode of Christianity Without Compromise was hosted by me, Jake Doberenz, and produced by Theophany Media, my podcast production company. If this conversation served you, please rate and review the show and share it with a friend and help others find it. You can also subscribe at jakedoberenz.substack.com to get email updates with new episodes every Tuesday and my often humorous theological reflections on Fridays. And as always, don't just listen, live it. Live out that Christianity without compromise. Thanks for listening.